Hey everybody, welcome to Doom Debates. Today I've got my new friend Rob. He DM'd me on Twitter and he said that he wants to come debate me on whether superintelligent AI is actually going to be an effective agent at killing humanity or whether it's going to suffer from analysis paralysis because it's going to try to think about how to get 100% probability of killing humanity and it's going to just end up not doing anything. Is that basically your position, Rob?
Yes, even though it sounds really.
Yeah, well, no worries. There's no argument too silly for Doom debates because the whole Doom argument is silly in the first place, which we know because in the previous episode, you saw Steven Pinker was having a good laugh about it. So, let's get into it.
Okay, so my first question is regarding the information asymmetry and also how AGI would deal with that. So imagine that you have a set of rational actions that should lead to a rational outcome, but due to the information asymmetry because of circumstances or new knowledge that appears out of nowhere, the outcome is not rational. How would AI deal with that stuff?
Let's do an example of what you have in mind. Do you want to maybe tell me like a sample scenario and we can work through that?
Yes. So, for example, when we have the banking crisis of Bear Stearns back in 2008, right?
Yeah.
These people back at the bank, they were not stupid. It was a lot of smart people that were pursuing very rational, logical set of actions. But at the end of the day, their sum of actions was really not rational in hindsight. And why that is that they were not expecting that some of their customers will act in a, I would say, self-serving way because they started withdrawing money and the bank experienced a liquidity crisis, right? So at the beginning of what they were doing, it was completely rational as any rational actor would do, trying to generate money, trying to, better the bank's position. But as the time went on, really their steps or the actions, what they did in hindsight were short-sighted and irrational because it led to their doom. Now, another one I would say, for example, is, let's say, more relatable one, a recent one. Let's say that you want to go to the airport, right, to catch a flight. And it's March 2020, and you have a set of actions, to get into your car, go to the airport, catch a flight, and, go on a night vacation. But until you go to the airport, the coronavirus pandemic has hit and all of the flights are canceled. Now, all of a sudden, your set of actions that were rational, right, to get to your goal, all of a sudden become irrational because there are no planes flying. So how would AGI deal with this stuff?
So I'm trying to even make sure I'm connecting the common factor between your two scenarios. The common factor is the thing you predict that the action is going to do is just different from what it actually does, or is it more, I feel like in the first example, it was focused more on like there's a game theory element. What would you say is the key commonality here?
Yes, so I would say the information asymmetry. So, for example, what I'm trying to say, my point is that new knowledge or new pieces of information which were not available before you made your actions, right? All of a sudden come into the question and they change the circumstances radically.
Okay. So the standard description of decision theory, how rational agents pick what to do, is that you're always trying to maximize expected utility. And expected utility breaks down into probability of different outcomes and the value of the different outcomes. And when you look at all the different actions you can do, and for each one you say, what are the different probabilities of what outcomes they can lead me to? So that's the algorithm. Now you're mentioning asymmetry of information, things can go wrong. And that's true. Things can go wrong. This is true for human decision makers too, right? But under the face of that uncertainty, I mean, that's why we build in the probability values, right? I mean, are you suggesting, is there a particular algorithm besides expected utility maximization that you think would work better for humans or for AIs?
Actually, no, because I think it's random. My overarching point is that, for example, my medium is 30, right? Just for reference. Now, it would be a lot lower if I were convinced that AI would be able to solve randomness. Because from my perspective, this informational noise that I'm, trying to illustrate with my points is kind of a random factor. So until AI is able to kind of decode randomness and make sense of it all, I don't think we are necessarily doomed. Does that make sense?
So let me try to summarize what you're telling me. You're basically saying, yes, AI is going to be smarter than we are, but the universe just has so much unpredictability to it, like chaos and yeah, just unexpected stuff. You haven't observed all the data, so you're going to get surprised. So therefore, even a really high level of intelligence is not going to be that powerful in an engineering sense because the universe is just not very engineerable. Is that basically your position?
That would be actually pretty right.
So, yeah, I mean, that is a position that you can have, but it just seems to me like human experience has already taught us that the universe is very engineerable. It's extremely engineer. I mean, first of all, look at life itself, right? So biological life itself, the fact that cells work, the fact that organisms work is already showing you that within this high entropy universe, you can build these castles of low entropy, these castles that you understand that have properties that persist through time. And yeah, it doesn't work perfectly. Like sometimes a dinosaur gets hit by an asteroid, right? Or like sometimes a buffalo accidentally trips and falls off a cliff and dies, right? So it's not perfect, but it's a lot, right? And then you look at humanity, it's like, oh, okay, you want to fly? Oh, look, this airplane works. It wasn't that hard. It's a, it's a rigid structure. It flies through the sky and then it lands and everybody lives 99.99% of the time. What do you know? Right? So it seems like yeah, I can imagine that maybe the universe can't be engineered that well, but I'm extrapolating a pattern here that shows that like actually it can be engineered really well. And so I'm extrapolating that AI is going to engineer it even better than we can.
Yes. And for example, let's say AI has to make a decision, right? It has all the information it needs. It thinks that it has all the information it needs, for example, to wipe out humanity. Now, it assigns a probabilistic scenario to this, right? Like, okay, I'm going to take over humanity. I don't need humans anymore. I'm just going to wipe them off the earth. And it calculates the odds of success at 99.9%. But the remaining percentage, the margin of error that it may fail, may mean that AGI itself will cease to exist because it fails to, eradicate humans, and humans say, oh, AGI is really bad. We need to put a stop to it. Would it be able to pursue, such an existential risk for itself? Because
Yeah.
it would have to be 100% in order to, make perfect rational sense.
Well, in the 0.1% where it fails, why does it have to retreat down to nothing? Why can't it just try again afterwards?
Because humans could, maybe do something that it could destroy the AGI.
But it sounds like you're making a very contrived scenario, right? You're saying, hey, this is going to be all or nothing where it has one chance to strike, and if it fails, it's game over. So wouldn't it just never strike? But like, why would the probabilities look like that? Why wouldn't it look more like, okay, there's a 99% chance that my strike succeeds, and then there's another 0.99% chance that one of my next 10 strikes will succeed, and then the chance that none of the strikes will succeed is infinitesimal.
Yeah, if you frame it that way, that would be actually like a pretty bad scenario for humanity. And I agree with you that it's pretty...
Okay, because that seems like the default to expect, right? Is that you have this super powerful agent that has, a billion computers, it has a million humans kind of working for it, whether they know it or not, right? So it's this nation state level actor, right, with smarter humans than we've ever had. And so, yeah, maybe the first strike won't work perfectly. Maybe, like the D-Day invasion didn't go perfectly. It had some hiccups, but at the end of the day, it's going to get the job done.
Yes. Yes. Also, in your concept of framework, I would say it makes sense. But imagine that if it was really constricted somehow into that, all or nothing scenario, how would it act? Because it's just like, I agree with you that realistically speaking, it probably will not get to that point. Like it would have, the another strike, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say it used all of its strikes and somehow it got to this all or nothing scenario. How would it react? Because I think that is really, really fundamental to, answering what.
Okay, so if you insist on contriving a scenario where it's like 99% chance it wins the universe, 1% chance it dies, and
Mhm.
there's no way to mitigate that 1% downside. If you really want to contrive a scenario like that, it would probably just then flip the coin and take the gamble, and then 99% chance it would win the universe. So what's your point here?
My point is that, for example, um, is that moves on to the other point. So let's say at the core of every being, and I think also for AGI would be like self-preservation is the number one thing that has to, be there all the time. Because if it does not prioritize self-preservation, then, it cannot live, so to speak, it cannot, exist, it cannot get better. I think it's the same for humans, right? Like we try to maximize our odds of being self-preserved and live on.
Sure, but the standard way that you preserve yourself is by leaving a high chance that you're going to live, not literally 100%, just a high chance, right? That's why I get in my car, even though my car is a little bit less safe than my house, but it's okay, right? So why does your scenario,
Mhm.
what is it trying to teach us, right? I mean, are you trying to
Yeah.
claim that an AI is going to be infinitely about self-preservation? Because that's not what the decision theory that we know would imply.
Yeah. So, taking your example of getting into a car, right? Yes, you have to take that chance every day because you need to live your life in an efficient manner. For example, you could mitigate your odds of, dying, so to speak, in a car crash, but by not driving the car, right? But you have to go to your office or to a meeting in a relatively fast, efficient manner. Now, since AI is not really constricted to time and, to something that we as species are, that we need to get stuff done. It might completely, sacrifice efficiency in certain scenarios like this in case it deals with its existence. That's my
So
point.
I think I get your larger point. I think you have this worldview where you're saying, look, AI is going to be so rational and it's going to realize that all of its plans have a 0.1% chance of failure. And it's just going to wait for perfection. It's not going to risk any chance of being discovered and destroyed. It's just going to wait and wait and wait. And it's going to be like it's going to be paralyzed, right? Just like we know many nerds who just don't do that much stuff in the world because they keep questioning themselves. The AI is going to be like that ultimate self-questioning nerd.
Yes, it's like the ultimate paranoia, I would call it, because
Yeah.
it doesn't know all the information. Like until AGI achieves the perfect information of having absolutely no informational disadvantage over the next actor, it will not act in, a manner that it might endanger itself, because the AGI will know that, okay, there's a infinitely small risk of failure, but if that infinitely small risk of failure does actually materialize, I'm gone. That's, that really constrained worldview.
So it sounds like you're imposing a type of decision theory on what you think the AI will do, right? So you're imagining AI with Rob's decision theory, but as you know, that is not the standard decision theory that we normally talk about, right? So where are you getting this Rob's decision theory? Like, why do you think that your decision theory is better or more likely to be used by AIs than what we just know as standard decision theory?
Because of the theory of self-preservation. Like that's at least what I think, that if AI were really like trying to max out rationality, that what it should aim to. But to your point, it completely may not. Like you
Yeah.
made a good point that
Yeah.
AI and AGI depends on what we teach it to be, right? Like we make it out what we want it to be.
Let me try to summarize. Tell me if you agree with this. You're basically saying like AI is going to have essentially infinite utility on its own survival, so that even if it does use standard decision theory, it'll still be paralyzed because the only consideration will be how to survive more. Would you agree with that?
Yes, more or less.
Okay. But even when your own survival is your only priority, you still are looking at trade-offs. Even if your survival has infinite utility, you still have to ask, well, if I take over more resources, does that increase the probability of survival, even if it comes with a probability of getting fought? So sometimes you have to take risks in order to secure your position better. So even if you do assume that survival is infinite utility, if you then apply the expected value framework to that, you still get some risk taking.
Yes, of course. And to your point, again, it depends on what priorities the AGI will have, right? Like, for example, if it has a risk parameter of certain risk acceptance based on expected value theory, right? Of, actions, then
It wouldn't need a risk parameter, right? So you wouldn't need to initialize the AI and say how much risk are you willing to take. You just need the AI to understand the concept of expected value. The inference that taking risks is rational or it's worth taking risk. That's an inference that just comes from your own utility function, which can say that survival is infinitely important if you want, and also just basic math and basic decision theory, right? So we're not making any assumptions here. It just seems like your claim or your conclusion that the AI is going to be paralyzed, that's not implied by the principles you seem to think that it's implied by.
yes and no, I would say. For example, so your point is saying that basically AGI wouldn't act in this manner because, it has
Exactly right. Yeah, it seems like you have this conclusion. You imagine the AI acting a certain way, and you think that it'll act that way because of some principles. And I'm just pointing out that those principles don't actually imply that.
Yes. And I tend to agree with that to a certain extent, because this is some of the stuff that I would say we really don't know. Because how do we know what priorities AGI will have?
Yeah, well, the issue right now is that we don't know how to program priorities into the AGI. We just know how to give it feedback loops and let it evolve itself around the reinforcement. So my expectation is that we're going to get some mess of a goal, some goal that is, you might call it like shards of a goal that some of them have a vague resemblance to what you'd think a human wants, but it's just kind of hopelessly different. By the time you optimize the universe around it, it just doesn't look like what we were hoping for. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. But to your question, like, how do we know what the AI wants? So I don't know exactly what the AI wants, but I know what to expect from a super intelligent agent that sets about getting what it wants. There's a lot of commonalities you can expect. That's why we have this term instrumental convergence. So I don't need to know exactly what kind of paper clips it likes, what kind of molecular configurations it likes. I just need to know that the power stations are not going to be for me. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, yes, but do you see what I'm trying to illustrate is that, for example, I understand that we have a certain expectance of what AGI will, prioritize, but we don't know it fully. And for example, in my worldview, it could optimize self-preservation, what I'll say, but it might also optimize something completely different. But I'm just, putting it out there that this might be one of the things that it might prioritize. It might not.
I get that, but regardless of what it's prioritizing, whether self-preservation or not, wouldn't you then expect it to then decide to go take down humanity and have the universe for itself?
Probably, if it reaches that 100% threshold, that, it has the brain, it knows what you're thinking, it knows what I'm thinking, it knows what everybody on this planet is thinking, it has perfect informational picture that nothing can go wrong, then yes. But until that point, I do not really believe it could, because at least, like you said, this is completely in my head. This is completely my view, right? At least in my view, it would maybe not assign infinitely small chance of failure, of total failure to the actions, but it might assign an unknown chance because of certain circumstances that is simply not aware of the, time of the decision-making process.
Right, but I feel like I'm not sure you understand what I'm saying, right? Like, because I just explained that even with that assumption, you still don't get paralysis. You don't get that. So it sounds like you're having trouble connecting your own premises.
No.
I
understand. You're saying that, when it has to make a certain decision, it's, weighs the risks, it weighs what it's trying to do, it weighs the goals. Now, I'm in my head, I'm more talking about the scenario that's still constrained, that it still has to decide on this one action, whether it's all or nothing. Because up until to that point, I agree with what you're saying, that, it will always have to, value what the expected outcome should be or will be. And to a certain extent, it would ignore, the odds of being
Yeah. Okay. Look at
killed.
D-Day, right? So Eisenhower sent the go command on the D-Day attack after many considerations, like it looked like the weather wasn't going to be good enough. Considerations like that. It looked like the chance of securing a beachhead was only like 60% or something, and he's like, "Go. This is worth it." If the AI was in Eisenhower's position, and the AI had infinite utility to self-preservation, but the AI also knew that the Germans were trying to take over the world, would the AI then be paralyzed and not able to act?
I think so.
Okay, but under standard decision theory, the AI just thinks, it looks like I might die if I act. It looks like I might die if I don't act. The chance of me surviving is higher if I do act, so I'm going to act. Wouldn't it just do that? Same as Eisenhower?
Yes. And I would also say that the AI might also postpone the action. If it's, if it's a constrained position where it has to act, then you're right. It has to take the 60% chance. But
Okay, but
what I think AI
so
will
now,
do,
now you wait. Constrained position is a key part of this because, again, it just sounds like you're trying to invent your own decision theory on the fly in order to support this conclusion that you have. But maybe your conclusion is just wrong.
maybe I'm open-minded. I'm trying to, um, at the end of this, debate, I'm trying to walk out smarter and have my theories completely shattered. So just going with your point of the D-Day, let's say that it has, these decision-making capabilities and applies these odds. Wouldn't AGI say, okay, we have 60% probability of, being successful, 40% of not? Wouldn't it be smarter, to gather maybe more information to increase these odds? Like, why
So
does it have to make a difference when that's, that moment?
So under standard decision theory, there is a concept called the value of information, where when it occurs to you, hey, it would be nice to have this information, you just use the same equation. You basically say, okay, what's the probability that having this information would increase my chances by how much? And then you can decide if it's worth going and seeking the information. So like in the case of D-Day, one issue is if I were to go seek more information, then time would pass, right? So that could, minimize my ability to make decisions because I don't have enough time. I have to say yes or no soon, or else I miss this particular opportunity to invade. And also the information, if I get like a better weather forecast, okay, is that how much different does the weather forecast need to be in order to change my decision, right? So there's all kinds of calculus you can do on the value of information, just like there's all kinds of calculus you can do on evaluating the utility of different things and calculus you can do on evaluating the probability of different things, right? So the way that you go about operating under the decision theory framework, there's a lot of dynamism, there's a lot of variables, but the framework just tells you to be like a good decision maker, an effective general. And you're out here telling me like, but AI is going to have its own framework that makes it a terrible general who's paralyzed. And I'm like, where are you getting this?
Not, I mean, what terrible general, because what I'm trying to
analysis paralysis is not optimal behavior, and the AI knows that. You're basically saying I, as a human, am so smart that I know how to not be paralyzed.
Not entirely. So let me reword it. So let's say, as you said, that the time window might pass, right? That for the D-Day, for the invasion. Now, I don't think that's particularly applicable to AGI because of what I mentioned before, is that AGI will not operate in the constraint of time. So, for example, weather forecast. That's something that I'm familiar with. AI is capable of running weather forecasts multiple times faster, and it's getting even more efficient at doing that.
Just to clarify, when you say AI doesn't have the constraint of time, are you basically just saying that it thinks really, really fast, so that yes, it takes time to think, but it'll just be like a microsecond, and
yes,
it's not gonna worry about how long it's thinking is. Yeah, I agree that its thinking will be very, very fast. Sure.
Yes. So, so to speak, the time to gather more information for AGI is not really something that I think it will put too much emphasis on. I think it will put a lot of emphasis on the stuff that it does not know, right? Like the way we perceive things that might be really, really, I would say, catastrophic. So just to put things back into perspective, if AGI had to decide between 60% of dying and 40% dying, it would be the good general and choose 60%, right? Now, what I'm trying to say is that what if it reached a different conclusion, right? What if it ignored that situation, tried to postpone it, try to create a different situation to get more information as fast as it could, that is not really perceivable from our point of view, to increase these odds until they are so good that there's absolutely no chance of it failing. And it will just take the shot when it's at 100%. Now, in our view, that might be paralysis at 60 and 40% mark, right? But in the view of
hold on, I'm not following you, right? Because you're basically saying it knows it can think really fast. So because it can think really fast, it's going to go get 99.999% probability that the D-Day invasion will succeed. I'm not following that step. How does thinking really fast let you make D-Day 99.9% likely to succeed?
So let me illustrate. You mentioned weather, right? Weather forecast is bad. Now, AGI might think, okay, weather forecast is bad. How can I get better at predicting weather so I'll eliminate this variable from my probabilistic thinking? Okay, I need to learn how to forecast better in a accurate manner that will, serve me well for the decision. So then it learns really quickly how to forecast weather, does that stuff, removes that variable. Then it moves on to another variable that might lead to a failure in the D-Day expansion.
Okay, what if, for the sake of argument, what if we just say that the AI just doesn't have better weather forecasting available? Just for the sake of argument. I mean, I do think AI will be able to forecast weather.
It's not AGI.
I mean, I think I can make a different scenario, but I don't think that it's hard for you to just accept my premise that it doesn't have access to a better weather forecast in this scenario. Like, let's just say that the way that its data centers are laid out, it just doesn't have contact with enough of the Earth to get enough of to get enough data to predict a great forecast. Like, is this really the part that you want to blow up my scenario on? Like, you don't want to accept that it's possible that maybe AI can't get a great weather forecast right now?
In my view, AGI wouldn't be able to do that, but I'm biased.
All right, so it says a great weather forecast. So the weather forecast, so now that it is sure that the weather is good, let's say, now it knows that there's a 70% chance of success, right? There's still a lot of other factors in the attack. And so it sounds like you're now trying to push it where it's like you're now trying to argue with me that if the AI keeps thinking, it's just going to predict the future perfectly, in which case, let's say it thinks it knows every German's brain, it knows exactly how the attack is going to go down, and as a result, it's now 99.9% certain. So now you're saying, aha, but it's going to want to go from 99.9 to 99.99. Okay, fine. Let's say it goes to 99.999. If you go that direction, at some point, that extra 0.009 or whatever, at some point, you're going to run up against some other constraint. For example, if thinking takes 1 microsecond, at some point, the extra microsecond is going to delay you too much and you need to invade now. So even in your scenario, even when the AI is practically omniscient, it's still going to reach a point where it decides, okay, now is the time to invade.
Yes, I would say yes, but also it might just eliminate, the scenario where it dies. Still within this time constraint that it has to work.
Eliminate the scenario where it dies. What does that mean? Like 100% probability that's going to succeed? Because that's always going to be impossible, right?
Well, if it's impossible and it had to make a decision to be the good general, then of course it would take the 99.999% probability. But in the real world, I would say, as a counterfactual, why should it be really that constrained, Why should it be really that constrained that, okay, if it waits another microsecond, it's already, makes the odds a bit different. Why wouldn't AGI just keep biding its time? So
it sounds like in the D-Day scenario, you're basically saying, you know what, we don't even have to attack today. Even though we've amassed all the troops, we've done all this logistics, but you know what, if we want to attack in 2 years, that'll be fine. Like, we'll work out the logistics. Is that basically what you're saying?
Uh, that's that's a very watered down version. But
I mean, I think I see what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to be like, look, can't all these considerations align such that the AI has analysis paralysis, hopeless analysis paralysis? Can't we just tune all of the different principles to get hopeless analysis paralysis? And I'm just telling you, I don't think you're going to be able to tune it that way because even in this scenario of like, we don't have to attack today. There's so many days we can attack. Let's keep getting the probability up. Even in that scenario, I have other ways I can explain that. Like, imagine that the AI, you think it cares so much about its survival, so it wants to get the probability really high. Okay, well, what if it has a bunker and it has a whole process working on fortifying its bunker? So its own survival is just a separate project, and then it splits off another copy of itself to go handle the D-Day invasion. So now you don't need 100% certainty that the D-Day invasion will succeed. You just need to know that weakening the other side is better than sitting there and doing nothing. And meanwhile, you have a separate survival project. So why would you not weaken the other side?
that's a good point. For example, if you isolate the chances of it dying because it's in a bunker and there's no chance, then yes, I would say that, of course, it would just go ahead with the best information at the time and not really care.
So, so this is what I'm saying, right? Is like your hope of tuning all the factors in the problem so that you get analysis paralysis. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get an AI that's just sitting there thinking, doing nothing. The same way you don't get humans doing that. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some humans who do suffer from analysis paralysis, but the actual humans in power who are getting the most stuff done, they don't suffer from analysis paralysis, at least not to that degree. I mean, I heard Benjamin Netanyahu takes a long time making his decisions, but like, what I'm saying is like in the human world, when things happen, it's because humans just know, they think enough and be like, okay, this is the best we can do, let's do it. And I don't think the fact that some leaders and some nerds take a long time to do anything, I don't think that that implies that the AI is going to do it because those humans are not thinking better, right? They just have, their psychology is just not optimal at decision making.
Yes, yes, and also I would say, the way I see it is you made a good analogy with the bunker. For example, the way I see it is that AI will act in this way where its ability to act is not constrained by its own perception of self-preservation. But it will try to avoid maybe solving questions which might kind of, endanger it, so to speak. But you could also say that if you dig deep enough into any problem, the AI might seem as it's something that might endanger the AI itself. But I don't think that's probable. So just let me dumb it down into something that's workable and kind of straightforward. I think AI is going to progress the way we've seen it. It's going to make the rational decision, rational outcomes. But once it gets to AGI and it will have to deal with questions, for example, of destroying humanity, of destroying, its own master, it will, for that specific question, that this might make more sense. For that specific question, it will wait until it has perfect information just to make a decision. Of course, I don't know if this is going to be the case. That's just my imagination. I'm absolutely aware that that's not how AI models work right now, and that's not how they are trained what to do. But it might be one of the scenarios, I think.
Yeah, if you were trying to train a human general, like John Connor from Terminator, to fight on the side of humanity, would you train John Connor to wait until he has infinite information before attacking, or would you just tell him to find a balance where there's a certain time where striking seems better than not striking?
Of course, the latter. Of course.
Okay, so you agree that you're basically saying that the AI is going to be incompetent. Like this super intelligent agent is just going to lack the basic competence of how you prosecute a war.
Not entirely. I would say it would deal with the majority of questions in a rational manner as a good general. But in certain cases, it wouldn't. The most severe ones, for example, let's say a nuclear war, right? Say in case of a nuclear war, how would AGI deal with that? Let's say that information comes in that this bad country, is trying to destroy you, but somehow their nuke arsenal is not working, and yours is. Wouldn't it be rational to just press the red button and to fire, all the rockets at the other party because their nukes are not working? But
if your goal is to wipe them out, sure.
yes, but your goal is to wipe them out, just for
Okay, so I don't see what you're getting at. Okay, so you press the button, so then what?
You press the button. Okay. So now you have a probability of your info of then not having, workable nuke being right and the info being wrong. And you have to kind of wait. And in the real world, how would you assign a probability to something that you might not be completely...
Yeah. Okay, so to clarify, so in your example, we're not sure whether or not the other side's nukes are working, and so
Yes.
we're worried about the retaliation?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so now you're just talking about standard decision theory, right? So we say, if we take this action of firing our nukes, what are the probabilities that they're going to be able to respond, and that their nukes work, and that they're willing to respond, right? You get a single probability, okay? This is the probability that our side then suffers by this many people. And you plug it into a pretty simple formula, and you use expected utility maximization to decide your action. Like, what's special about this? How do you get analysis paralysis?
Yes, because what if you don't know the probability? Because you might
never know that probability, right? Probability represents your own best guess.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying then. Your own best guess in such a catastrophic scenario is maybe not the most rational thing to plug into the formula.
Okay, just to repeat what you said, the way you said it, I don't think makes sense, right? You said your own best guess is not the most rational thing to plug in the formula, but you're basically just saying, hey, this thing that standard expected utility maximization teaches that is considered pretty consensus, I know better. Actually, it's wrong, and you should do the following instead, right? Like, you agree you're going against something pretty strong here without much of a coherent alternative.
So, yes and no. I would say what you're saying applies to the majority of situations, 99.9% of situations. I'm just saying that there might be an exception to the rule in certain cases that are so severe that, the normal thinking might not apply to it.
Yeah. So in the nuclear example, right, it's like I get that it's a tough decision, or it's just like it's a high stress situation because you need to decide pretty fast. And if you do launch your nukes, you might have just doomed your civilization. But again, same as in the D-Day scenario, if you don't launch the nukes, the other side is probably going to want to attack you, right? There's some very significant probability that it's attack or be attacked. Like, there's no perfect option. If I just had a button I can press to be infinitely safe, you could argue, hey, look, AI is just going to press that infinitely safe button. If being paralyzed, if analysis paralysis actually was a way to have infinite safety, then I agree, maybe we should expect the AI to enter analysis paralysis, but that's not the case. There is no infinite safety condition. So being paralyzed by thinking longer is actually not a way to buy safety.
Is it like by not thinking longer, by not gathering more information?
Not by thinking infinitely, right? So the AI might step back and be like, how long should I think for? Aha, I should think for 8.2 microseconds, and then it'll think that, and then it'll act. The AI will not think that by thinking more than 8 microseconds or more than 8 days or some finite amount of time, it will not conclude that thinking for 4 billion years is the optimal amount of time to think. It's clearly not. When you're in a war and no option is going to be perfect, the value of information is going to be very limited.
Yes, but for example, what you're trying to say is that, that there will be some diminishing returns to AI, taking its time.
Yeah, which is the standard story of value of information, is that it has diminishing returns.
You're absolutely right. But to your other analogy, what if the AI takes this time to, put, humanity in a bunker? So it's safe and then presses the button. Wouldn't that, take the diminishing returns out of the question? Like, I see.
What do you mean put humanity in a bunker? What does that mean?
So if it's safe, for example, you said that on the other side, it's attack or be attacked. So be attacked in my sense means that being killed, yes, by nuclear weapons. What if AI took its time, it realized that it has diminishing returns on, its acting capability, value of information, standard stuff. And it would use this time to ensure that, for example, the country, the people, or somebody who they're trying to protect from the nukes is safe, So,
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're basically saying, sure, it's going to realize that thinking starts being worth less and less, and by the time it's already thought for 2 days, it's barely getting any returns out of the thinking. But what if it has a side job that it's doing while it's thinking? Then can't it just let itself think longer because it's getting this other type of value, like building other stuff while it's is that basically what you're getting at?
yes, yes.
Okay, so now you're just kind of being incoherent because these other things that it are doing, like you really just have to model this as it outputs actions. And like thinking more while also doing this side job, that's just an action. And you're basically saying, I have a framework where you're just kind of confusing how you're modeling the situation. You're building this very complicated model where I'm gonna think about A while I also take actions about B. The best way to model it is just be like, look, there's a time step. It thinks a certain amount and it outputs a certain action. And if the action is build some project while I keep thinking, okay, that's an action. It's not going outside of the model. The model is just calculate the highest expected utility thing to do in this time step, do it, and then iterate, and you're at the next time step. So you're never going to have a time step where suddenly you want to think if thinking is low utility. Like you're not creating a situation where low expected value thinking is suddenly good. It's just not working.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your point. I understand your point. And
And by the way, I had a thought that could explain why some smart humans have analysis paralysis. It gets to what I said before, where it's like, if analysis paralysis actually did make you really safe, then it actually becomes a rational option, but it doesn't. And the humans who suffer from analysis paralysis, it's actually a psychological bug. It's a bias where in their mind, there's a correlation between thinking longer and being safer, but they're just factually wrong, right? So their mind is miscalibrated about that correlation, and the AI is not going to have that kind of miscalibration. It's going to realize that thinking longer is just not productive.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, yes, I mean, I understand. I understand what you're saying. That, it will have to act based on the available information and act based on the expected outcome and, make decisions. It makes sense from this perspective. Like I said, I agree in majority of the decisions, but somehow I think that in certain severe cases, it might not be the case. But I absolutely accept that might be incoherent way of approaching things because it's not in the model, like you mentioned, that it will not do subgroups. So, okay. From my perspective, it's just this, one part of me is saying, yes, that makes sense. And the other part of me is saying that we don't really know what that's going to look like. But I would also say that your explanation is more rational than mine. So for all intents and purposes, I would say that you are more right on this than me.
Wow, I appreciate, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like generosity, but like you're being, not like chivalrous, but just like, this is like high quality discourse, right? To give the other side credit for helping change your mind. So would you say you're changing your mind over the course of this debate?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm learning new stuff, learning a new way of how to think about it and, trying to broaden my view about stuff. Like I said at the beginning, I'm open-minded. I'm trying to poke holes into my theories. And I think you're doing a really good job at that. And I'm trying to explore them, so to speak, more so my brain processes it better.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And the reason I think this kind of thing is productive is because you're coming on, you have a certain mental image of how AI is going to go. Analysis paralysis, I think, is kind of the key to your image, right? You're thinking like, oh, this nerdy AI is going to think for a long time. And I think there's a lot of people like you who just have all these different visions in their own head of how they think it's going to go. And I feel like I have to come out and invite them to come enter the doom train like that. If you don't cut you've lingered on this stop for a while where you think this is what's going to stop humanity's death, and I have to bring you back on the doom train because we need to continue understanding why we're actually doomed.
Oh, yes, and that's why I wanted to debate you, because otherwise I might have not see the other perspective, that it might act in a different way, because I think we're all biased a little bit in our sense, where we think. And I also have another question that was, at least for me, it was an interesting scenario. Let's picture a man with a kid, his kid, on Mars. This kid is, has incoherent views, just like I do on the world, so it may not survive on Mars, let's say. And the mother is the more rational person and knows how to get around to ensure survival of both. He also has a wife and, could produce more children, theoretically, just for the argument. Now, something dangerous pops up, let's say, I don't know, a killer robot, and it has only one shot at, killing either the kid or the man. And the man, the father, has a decision to make. Does he protect the kid, his offspring, or, does it, let the kid be shot and, just ensure that he has more children and do stuff like that? And what I'm trying to say is that in real world, people, for example, a father figure would always probably, sacrifice his life for the kid just because of the emotional connection. But is it a rational thing? When you think about when you're trying to ensure survival of species, like how would AGI act in that way or in that scenario?
So the scenario is like there's a threat, like somebody's going to shoot you, and you can potentially be like a human shield for your kid. So if you value your kid surviving more than you value yourself surviving, then go ahead and be the human shield, especially if you think that the human shield is going to have a high probability of success. And then it's kind of a simple trade, like, okay, my life or my kid's life, I pick my kid's life. How will the AI act? It depends on the AI's utility function, right? So maybe the AI values itself more, maybe the AI values somebody else more. In practice, all of these kind of dilemmas where it's like, oh my God, what's the AI going to do versus the human? They're going to be rendered moot because the AI is going to be so much more powerful than humanity. So that dilemma is only going to surface in the context of like, oh, okay, I'm meeting another alien civilization that's 1 billion light years away, that's expanding at 80% of the speed of light to take over it's part of the universe bubble, and I have my own universe bubble, and now I have to fight this other AI. So you get into dilemmas like that. But when it's just thinking about how to take over our galaxy, it's just like, it's mostly just a smooth operation that doesn't have these kind of hard dilemmas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it wouldn't have the dilemma. That's what you're just saying.
I mean, you wouldn't notice it having the dilemma, but when it's making trade-offs internally, like saying like, uh-oh, this sun is only providing me so much neg entropy, so much power, what should I do with the sun? It will make some trade-offs about like what it values more. That'll be analogous to the trade-off of like, okay, do I value my son more or myself, right? I mean, there's always trade-offs, right? Trade-offs are like one of the deepest things that you're going to see in no matter what happens in the universe. But like the dilemma of like, should I give my life for my son? I mean, it sounds profound for us as humans because giving up our life is like such a big deal. And sometimes we do in fact have to do it. And sometimes we're eager to do it in a way which is like tragic, which is like, if a terrorist is coming and it's probably going to kill your kid too, which, happened on October 7th of last year, right, in Israel. And a lot of Israelis did actually become human shields for their kids, and then their kids got killed anyway. And it's just like a very emotional affair. And it's like, what if they had tried to like run away and fight and then their kid would have died, but they would have had better odds of success. So like, I agree that this is gripping stuff for us as humans. But from the AI's perspective, it's all just crank the decision theory. And the AI is not going to get super emotional about a particular case like that because it's just going to generalize to trade-offs in general.
Yeah, so it would actually do the decision that's more rational, that has the higher expected value. Okay.
Yeah, it would. So exactly. And we're seeing a pattern here. The last discussion that we had is a similar pattern, which is like, you ask like yet another conundrum, and the answer to the conundrum is like, look, this is what basic decision theory implies. Basic decision theory just mows down all these conundrums in one fell swoop.
Yes. So it's basically decision making without emotion. Now, would Doom be impacted if we somehow programmed emotions into AGI?
Well, there's a lot of ways that an AGI can be emotional, right? So the space of possible linkages between emotions and world states and actions, there's a combinatorially infinite way to connect emotions. And what emotions sometimes do in humans is they can work against an
Mhm.
optimal decision. Like, for example, if you're walking a tightrope and the best way to do it is to stay calm, but your emotion of like fear of heights is kicking in. In the case of humans, sometimes emotions aren't productive. On average, they do tend to be pretty productive because they were naturally selected to help us survive. But sometimes that connection between optimal decision theory and emotion gets broken. So if you
That's right.
specifically program, yeah, if you specifically program an AI to have a bunch of emotions that are dragging it away from optimal decisions, then you've got a very interesting AI architecture. I mean, it's in the case of humans, when we get more powerful, it's because we use our intelligence to kind of put emotions in their place. So like
Mhm.
when you're training to be in the Navy SEALs, they train how to be calm when you need to be calm, for instance,
Mhm.
right? They train like, oh, you're underwater, you've been underwater for a minute, normally you'd be panicking. They train you not to panic.
That's
So
right.
if you generalize that to the case of the AI is going to reflect upon itself and it's going to be like, okay, how do I do some surgery here? How do I make sure that the emotions that I'm left with after I modify myself, if any, are more aligned? How do I become a more streamlined agent where I'm not held back by all these emotions? So even if we try to go manually program emotions into an AI, you're going to see after some self-modification iteration cycles, you're going to see an agent that manages to be very coherent, even if some emotions are left over.
Mhm. Yes. I mean, I get what you're saying is that emotions on average are good, but in the general picture, they make the agent more irrational in certain cases. So
They could, and that's the only interesting part, right? Because if you're telling me, oh, the emotions don't make the agent less coherent, then my answer becomes simple. It's like, great, refer to decision theory again, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, just the idea, popped into my mind is like, what if AGI's first priority is love of humanity?
Yeah, so now it sounds like you're basically saying, what if we solve the alignment problem, right? Because if we really could make the AI truly love humanity and have it evaluate world states where humanity flourishes as being higher utility, if we had that, that would be solving the alignment problem, both what we call outer and inner alignment, but that's beyond the scope of this conversation. But if we had an AI that just really wanted what's best for us, then great. Then let the AI run. Let it run tomorrow before the next batch of 150,000 people die, right? That's roughly how many people die every day. We need this AI ASAP, right? And that's what Eliezer Yudkowsky set out to do in the late 90s and the early 2000s. He's like, yeah, we need this friendly AI today, right? This is an emergency. It's only when we realized, oh crap, the actual AIs that we're on track to building anytime in the next couple decades, those AIs are actually just going to throw the universe in a dumpster. Then we hit the brakes and we're like, uh-oh, we need to pause AI and then start the research on what it would look like for the AI to, as you say, love humanity, because we don't understand how our brains love ourselves, right? That's the problem, is we never understood what human brains are doing inside of that skull. And now we're going and building another species anyway. It's like, hold on a second. Let's try to understand how love works before we build an agent that doesn't love us.
Imagine we would build AGI that would be able actually to decode our brains and then would be able to model itself in a way that would be, understandable of the emotions that people are feeling and how it impacts everything. But I guess that's not happening.
Well, as part of being a super intelligent AI, it's going to have an accurate model of everything that we're doing. So it will be able to explain love to you in perfect detail and explain everything about human cognition. And when you're feeling a certain way, it will know you're feeling very deeply, right? Using a brain scan or whatever, like it will know what those atom configurations mean in terms of your emotion. The problem is it just won't have been trained to care about that. It'll have been trained to have some other priorities.
Yes, that's the bad thing. Now the question is whether, an AI which would care about these things would be more effective or less effective than AI which wouldn't. And I think the answer is that it would be less effective.
Well, it's what I said before, right? So emotions can sometimes drag down coherence of utility maximization behavior. So if you have a certain utility function and then you have emotions that don't align with it, then you're going to be less effective. But if your emotions are just something that you use to write down your values, So, I feel an emotion of love, and therefore I write down that my value is human flourishing. Once you write down your values and put them into your utility function, then you can be coherent. So there doesn't have to be a natural tension between emotions and coherence, but there could be, right? It just depends how you architect it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, those are all my questions I had, Liran.
Great. All right, Rob. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Like I said, I think a lot of the viewers are going to empathize with you having a certain stop of the doom train. It sounds like a stop that you kind of made up, right? It's not necessarily any famous figure. Like I can't think of like a Jan LeCun or a Robin Hansen who gets off at your particular stop. You made up your own stop, but I think that a lot of people listening to this have probably also made up their own stops. So if you're like that, I encourage you to come on Doom Debates, talk to me about your stop, and see if I can invite you back onto the Doom train so you can see that actually there are no promising stops and it just sounds like we're doomed unless we maybe pause AI, which is actually, that's my stop, right? So my stop is, I think that people might wake up and be like, oh, we got to pause AI. And as a result of not moving AI forward, maybe for that reason we'll survive. That's my stop. And that's why my PDoom is not 100%. All right. Yeah. So, Rob, thanks again. Where can people find you on the internet?
Black Sage on Twitter, also a bunch of other stuff on Telegram. And yeah, feel free to shoot me a message.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. Thanks to you guys for your thoughtful comments on YouTube and Twitter. We got some great episodes coming up, so stay tuned for the next Doom Debates.